Alright, today we are doing the ultimate test of digital versus analog. Okay, today I've decided to put digital and analog head to head. We're going to finally prove which one is superior. On the one hand, we've got pure precision and logic. We're going to be using a synthesizer that's inside my computer. It's Serum, and you know and love it. On the analog side, we're going to be dealing with rusty wires filled with electrons, and we're going to be using a Behringer Neutron, which is on my desk. I've put together a series of challenges, and we're going to be stepping through each of these to find out which is superior, digital or analog. The first challenge will be to create clean sine tones. We're going to be looking at how clean our sine is and how siney it is. Is it a perfect sine shape, or are there extra harmonics creeping in? The next challenge will be to create a classic saw base and to see what sort of textures we can get out of those saw bases. This is just going to be a straight up sawtooth with a filter sweep through it, and we're going to be looking for dynamics and clarity out of that saw pluck. The next test will be making a respace. So this will be using at least 2 oscillators and detuning them slightly. So we're going to be looking at what detune options we get and what sort of a res we can make out of the available oscillators. For the fourth test, we'll be analyzing the filter. So we'll be looking at how the filters hold up with strong resonance sweeps and seeing how musical they are at the real edges of their usage. Then the fifth test is an overall impression of the usability of each synthesizer. So let's get on with it. So the first thing I should mention about the Neutron is that we've got 2 oscillators, we've got a filter section, we've got 2 envelopes. One is hardwired to the amplitude, one's hardwired to the filter. And when I say hardwired, I mean that you can still edit that with the patch bay. We've got an overdrive unit, which we've bypassed with these settings here, and we've got a delay unit, which is unfortunately really difficult to bypass, so it's still active. We've also got some additional kind of helper modules, utility modules, which aren't really being used today. So the important thing here is the oscillators and the filter, because that's essentially what we're really testing today, and a little bit of the envelopes. I am recording examples on my Neutron so that we can use those against Serum in a minute. So here I've got a patch which is just going to make a sine wave for us. So we've opened the filter all the way up, we're bypassing the overdrive, and currently we've got, which should be a sine wave. And we'll just tune it. Okay, that sounds like a sine wave to me. Let's hit record. Beautiful. Okay, now we need a saw pluck. So we need a sawtooth. And we need a filter which is lower, faster. And we need to play that lower. Maybe a little resonance. A bit faster. Sounds nice to me. Let's record that. Okay, now we want to make a res. So we just need a second oscillator. Luckily, the Neutron has one of those. Bring that in. Oops, let's get rid of the envelope depth and bring up the filter. Now they sound a little too close together in terms of tuning. Let's knock them off a little. Might bring this one up a little. Oh, this one up more, this one down more. Down a little. Yeah, I think that sounds nice. Let's record that. We'll bring the filter down. And yeah, we'll record that. Okay, and the last test case that we want is a nice filter sweep. So I'm going to put this on a sawtooth, just one oscillator, so we'll just use the left one. And we'll bring the filter cutoff all the way down, bring the envelope depth all the way up. We'll put the decay time all the way up, and this should just sweep, and bring the resonance up. And this should just sweep through all of the frequency range available. Okay, cool. So we've got a nice filter sweep there. So I've got one oscillator on a sawtooth. I've got the frequency set quite low. I've got the resonance turned all the way up and the envelope depth turned all the way up. I've got a nice long decay on our filter envelope, and I've got just a static on-off on our main oscillator voice. And I've adjusted the levels appropriately. So now I'm going to record that. And that's our filter sweep from the Neutron. Okay, so let's do the same things in Serum. First up, we want a sine wave, so let's use basic shapes. We'll go up. There we go. Okay, so let's record that. Okay, I've initialized Serum and we're trying to make a saw pluck now. So I'm going to turn on the filter and I'm going to drag the LFO1 over to the cutoff, but I'm going to put it into envelope mode and I'm going to turn off the BPM sync. I'm going to change the shape a bit so that it's a little more plucky. Here's what we've got so far. Maybe we can make that a bit longer, a bit faster. Nice. Okay, that's got a little bit of pizzazz in the top end. Let's give it a slightly higher cutoff. There we go. Somewhere around there, maybe a little more resonance. That sounds nice. Let's record that. Okay, our next patch is a Reese. So let's initialize this and we'll use unison. We'll bump it up to 2 voices. And in global, we're going to bring the width down to 0 so that they're not offset left and right, so that they play simultaneously. Here's what that sounds like. I'm going to add a filter to that and maybe bring the detune down just a little. Maybe bring the cutoff down further. There we go, that's pretty rich. Let's record that. So our last test case for Serum, let's initialize, is to just do a filter sweep. So let's bring the level down. We're going to turn on the filter. We're going to bring the resonance all the way up. And we're going to put an LFO on the cutoff again. Going to set it to go from the very maximum to the very minimum and put it in envelope mode and bring the time way down. I think we can go even slower than that. Nice. Okay, let's record that. All right, that's it. We now have our 4 different test cases and we're ready to do some judging. All right, it's time to do some judging and some analysis. So first up, this is the Neutron sine wave. Now you can clearly see in there that there are additional harmonics in the EQ, and that while this looks pretty siney, it's quite obvious there's additional stuff happening up in the EQ range. So this is sort of a blend of more of a sine wave and a triangle. Let's have a look at Serum though. So as expected, Serum is outputting a perfect sine wave. There are no additional harmonics being created. Let's A/B the actual sounds. So I think in terms of outputting an actual sine wave, Serum definitely takes this round. Okay, moving on to the pluck. Here's the Neutron pluck. And here's the Serum pluck. To be honest, I like them both. I think we're going to call this round a tie. So you see that the shape of them is fairly similar. You see that they both have similar frequency content. And really, we could dial in any sort of pluckiness based on the envelopes of either. I think when I was building both of these, you could really see that there was a lot of control over the dynamics on each. Obviously, Serum, you can probably get a little more surgical and create crazy LFO shapes, but luckily we're not testing that component today. Okay, now the respaces. Now this is where I think things get kind of interesting, is that while styling in the amount of detune on the Neutron, I had to kind of fiddle around a little bit, whereas on Serum it was really straightforward. Luckily, I've kind of wound up in similar places with each. So here's the Neutron's res. And here's Serum's. I think the filter cutoffs are set slightly differently, but yes, you can definitely make a res out of each. I actually kind of prefer the tonality of the Neutron, but I think that might just be the slightly higher filter cutoff. But certainly they've got fairly similar characters. You see that they look very similar in the EQs as well. So I think this is really a tie. I'd be happy with either of those reses as a starting point for sound design. Let's move on to the filter. Okay, now when I play these, what we're going to be looking for is where we can see the resonance actually moving through the frequency range. But first, the Neutron. Here's what the filter sweep sounds like. So wow, you can really see it like tear down from above 10K, and then you get this sort of like intermodal distortion as the filter accentuates frequencies in between the actual frequencies, the harmonics of the sawtooth. It looks really awesome. Let's have a look at the Serum one. Wow, that looks awesome. Again, it's got that really clinical character up top, doesn't it? Like it doesn't fizz or hiss or fall apart at all. Let's have a quick listen for just the harmonicness of the filter sweep. So I can't really remember what the Neutron sounds like at first. Let's check that. Oh, you can hear it's like really shredding through. It sounds quite sweet to me compared to Serum. Yeah, it doesn't have the same like shredding character to it. So I don't know that you'd be able to pick the character of either of these out of a recording. They're just slightly different. Like the shredding, ripping, tearing tones up in the high end of the Neutron still sound really pleasant. Like I'm using words that you would normally use to describe an overdrive, and that's not quite what I mean. I mean, it's got a really biting character, whereas Serum on that particular filter just sounds really a little clinical, a little too safe. I know there's lots of other filters in Serum. I wasn't able to test them all. I just picked the default and we went with that. So in terms of these filter sweeps, I'm going to give this one to the Neutron just for that kind of silky but biting edge right up in the top end. I think Serum is probably just as technically correct, but I really preferred the aggressiveness of the top end of the Neutron filter sweep. All right, so now this is the most subjective part of it, usability. I think that they're both really incredible tools. I think the main differences can be summarized with the Neutron. I mean, the Neutron is a very limited feature set. It's 2 oscillators versus Serum's 2 oscillators with a sub-oscillator, and they both have a noise oscillator. In Serum, you get a whole bunch of effects. On the Neutron, you get an overdrive, which we were bypassing. You get clarity of sound, and a delay, which is really hard to bypass. And then in terms of filter types, well, you get low, bandpass, and high on the Neutron, and you get a whole cacophony of options available in Serum. And on the Neutron, you get 2 envelope generators, and in Serum, you get lots. And that's, you know, LFOs as well. There's 1 on the Neutron, and you can have heaps in Serum. So I think that they're quite clearly different tools, and the usability isn't really directly comparable. The way that I think about Serum is like this like precision wonderland. Like I can be really clinical, and I can get right into something and work with it. And it's also got a lot of options that I can kind of just test out and see what they do and how they kind of interact with the sound. And of course I've got redo and undo, and I can kind of like use the strengths of digital over there. Whereas the Neutron, I mean, It's crazy. It just does its own thing most of the time. Like quite often I'll bump knobs without really realizing that I've done it when I'm, just cleaning the desk or whatever. And so whenever I turn this thing on, it's got some crazy not initialized patch. It's great fun. It just does its own thing, and you kind of hold on and go for the ride with it. And that's something that's really hard to do in digital. Like that idea of you turn it on and it's just doing its own thing. You don't get that so much in digital. Like maybe you load presets and you find things that are a bit out there, but it's not quite the same as like a bunch of knobs. And that's really the other thing, is that all these knobs, like they're just there. You just grab them and you twist them. And if you're thinking about, patch points and stuff, you don't really overthink it. Like in digital, you're like, oh, well, I need to address this to that. And then I jump into the matrix and I control this. Here, you're like, well, I've got 2 attenuators. My options are limited. I'm just going to go from here to there and it will make a noise. So I think on usability, they're slightly different tools and they have slightly different ways of interacting with them. I think it's another draw. So adding up those points, in the first round of sine wave, Serum took the win. In the second round of Saw Pluck, it was a tie because they both did equally good jobs. In the third round of making a classic respace, there was another tie, a bit of an upset. The Neutron and Serum simultaneously able to produce very good Reeses. In the fourth round, the filter sweeps, Neutron had its first win, as it had some really nice silky qualities in the top end. And then in the usability scores, what can I say, another tie, because they're different tools and they're usable for different reasons. Which brings us to the final tally, which is a tie. Digital and analog, both useful, both very good. You should enjoy both for the things that they are both good at. So on the one hand, digital's fantastic for total recall, for options available, for not having heaps of equipment laying around, no cabling, easy to work with your sound card and your computer. Fantastic positives there. And analog, I mean, it can sound fantastic. The interface can be really tactile and hands-on. The unpredictability of not ever having an init patch and just being forced to work with what you've got, and having creative limitations placed on you in terms of the equipment that you've got. I think they're both equally valuable, and I think you can learn to work with both and have a great time doing it. And so that was my main point I wanted to get across today, was that they're both really useful tools. They're both fantastic. And it was fantastic that we've got so many incredible options. Like on digital, there's stuff you could not do in the analog world. Look at Soothe or DSEQ. You're never going to get that in analog. On the other hand, a cheap as chips little machine like the Neutron just has so much character. It's really opinionated about how it wants to work. Yeah, it's semi-modular and you can like route things around to overcome its shortcomings, but those shortcomings are there because it's really bossy about how it wants you to interact with it. And so when you use it, you're constantly bumping up against its limits and having to be a little bit creative about how you want to proceed. I'm always doing FM on this thing, and the FM is uncontrollable, absolutely useless. It's perfect because I can get right in there and get really weird sounds, resample them, and then I'm working with an analog sound source doing its amazing, crazy, weird analog thing, but inside a digital sample of it where I've got all that precision and control. So I hope I got across to you today that I really enjoy both, and I think you should too. I think if you're thinking about adding outboard gear to your studio, I think you should definitely do that. I think it's really powerful and fun. It's just very different as well because it has different strengths. It can't make you a sine wave. It can, however, make you a really nice filter sweep. And you get to know the positives and minuses of particular equipment over time as you use them. And that goes for software as well. As you get to know it better, you get to understand what it can and can't do and understand where it fits into your creative process. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I will catch you in the next one.